Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Impact Days. We're so happy you're here. We're so happy to be able to present 2 days of conversations and discussions and mentorship and programming about the day-to-day realities facing people in the music community. My name is Michael Bracy. I'm been very fortunate to work at the intersection of music and public policy for 25 years. And I'm a senior advisor to Youth on Record, among other things. Today's session is focusing specifically on radio and the role that radio plays right now in the music economy and the music ecosystem. We're going to talk about strategies for getting your songs played on radio, how to do that, why to do that, why radio works. And we're also going to play a lot of songs. So we're actually, the superstar panelists have actually curated a playlist that we're going to be listening to some of the latest and greatest, possibly for some people in this room. And we're going to use those songs as a sort of an entry point to talk about why those songs work. Maybe it's a great song that for some reason isn't great for radio, all those different things. So that's going to be our format. We're going to start by allowing our panelists to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their role in radio as it kind of relates to today's conversation. So we'll start with Alisha.
Hi everybody, my name is Alisha Sweeney. I work for Indy 102.3, the Colorado Public Radio station here in Denver. And my role, not only am I a midday host, I was just thinking about you and how I haven't seen you in so long. But I'm working right now, so stop it. And I have chosen a career in Denver because I love Denver so much. I grew up in Colorado, and I have chosen a career in music and specifically radio because I love telling the stories of brilliant musicians. And so I'm very lucky at Indy 102.3 to not only be a host that you can hear 10 to 2 every day, but also I'm the local music director. And all of you Colorado artists that submit your music to me, I have the privilege of listening to that and helping to get it on the radio. So I feel very lucky that you're here, and I hope you can learn something from us today.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Chris Sanley, and let's try that again. I'm Chris Sanley. I am currently exiting 15 plus years of radio promotion, and I'm going to be the new music director at KEXP in Seattle starting next month. Very excited. Thank you. And so it's going to be such a treat to get back to the radio side of things, but I've been, kind of behind the scenes helping to promote music with artists that I love for many, many years up until now, and we'll be able to continue to do so on the other side of the radio now. So thrilled to be here with you all, and Bracy.
Hi, I'm Trujillo. I don't work in radio for the first time in 15 years. That's going to change soon, I hope. But I have had the privilege of working with both of these amazing women in different capacities. I was at Indy 102.3, 102.3 FM for 7 years. Chris and I worked together when I was music director at KGNU in Boulder, KAFM in Grand Junction, and I think in college radio even. A very long time, and I'm very proud of Chris for becoming the new music director at KEXP. And I just decided that I was going to bombard this panel, so thanks for having me.
So because I'm from Washington, D.C., we are constitutionally mandated to have every panel have a slide. So we're going to define some terms real quick, just in terms of what we're talking about today and how technology is changing. Because again, 25 years ago, radio is radio. We all knew what it was. And now radio fits in a constellation of lots and lots of different ways that people are distributing and accessing music. So we want to just kind of quickly walk through when we use radio as a catch-all, what that actually is going to mean in terms of how music is distributed today. So the first idea is non-interactive versus interactive music services. And basically what that means is it gets at how music is licensed and accessed. Interactive services are like Spotify or Apple Music, where you're building playlists and the user is the one controlling what music they're listening to. Non-interactive is what traditional radio is, where a programmer, a DJ, somebody is actually choosing a sequence of songs that they want you to hear. And there's obviously an art to that, right? There's an art to how do you sequence songs, how do you bring an audience along. So that's very important in terms of how, we're not going to go deep in this conversation about how the revenues flow, royalties flow, but that is a lot to do with how money goes through the system when the artist's actually getting paid for play. The second is terrestrial versus streaming. So terrestrial is basically over-the-air radio. I'm sorry, we're having feedback problems. Can you guys hear? I'm afraid I'm going to just do that. Okay. Is this working? Okay, good. Thank you, guys. So just out of curiosity, who here listens to like radio in their car, like over-the-air radio? So that's most of us, okay. So again, historically, so that's called terrestrial. That is radio, that is the way technology used to work. A radio would have a signal and be broadcast, and you'd have a dial and you would find it. That now, most stations also now stream, right? So KEXP, that Chris is going to be working at, has a radio signal in Seattle that reaches across Puget Sound. But in my home, we listen to that station constantly through streaming, right? And same with Indy 102.3. So radio stations now typically will both have an over-the-air signal and then they also will stream. There are also lots of platforms that don't have a radio signal, but they're essentially doing radio-type stuff. So they're just streaming radio, internet radio, right? Commercial versus non-commercial. One of us on this panel worked, I think, commercial for a hot minute. I don't know, Bruce, if you want to speak to your experience. Buried on your LinkedIn page as an intern. Did you not intern? There it is. It's deep.
That's actually why I decided not to work in commercial.
Right. Yes.
I was like, I actually never did it.
Yeah.
And I'm also a huge music fan, and I had the opportunity to work in commercial radio as well. And just for my own personal reasons, I did turn down the job. I think commercial radio does have its place, but it didn't work for me because I love a variety of music, and I love telling the stories of the underdogs. So that's why I chose to work in public radio and have done so over the last couple decades. But no shade to commercial radio if someone's going to ask. Okay. I'm the radio sweetheart.
Yes, you are.
So, one of the reasons we want to bring up that distinction is because they're very different business models and they're very different economic structures and they're very different strategies as a musician. If you are hoping to get onto commercial radio and the implications of the arrangements that you'll be involved in and also the potential. Because if you get into those pipelines, that will give you different paths of opportunity than if you're in non-commercial radio or public or community radio, or the other terms that sometimes gets used. Again, I think Alisha said it very well. I mean, fundamentally, non-commercial radio, it's about storytelling, it's about culture, it's about basically having the ability to use your radio platform to turn people onto music that you're passionate about. Commercial radio, in a nutshell, is basically about how do you basically through market testing, how do you put together sequences of songs that will reach a certain demographic and keep them listening to their station for as long as possible so they can maximize ad rates, because that's their business model. So it's basically billboards for music. But you'll get into that maybe a little bit in some of the examples we're talking about. But these are just industry choices that artists make as they're thinking about how to approach radio. And finally, I just have to say, getting paid. Is everybody here signed up for Sound Exchange? Right, Sound Exchange it distributes the royalties for streaming radio. They paid $1 billion last year in streaming royalties. The money is getting very significant for some. That means basically if one of these stations plays your song, if you are signed up for Sound Exchange, you will receive a royalty. There are tens of millions of dollars of unclaimed royalties for music that gets played on these platforms that the artist is not signed up, so they don't get those royalties. And same thing goes for your songwriting royalties. Everybody here probably is a PRO relationship. So just make sure that you're signed up. If you have questions about that, you can see us later. We can talk about that. All right, that's our overview. Questions? Concerns?
With Sound Exchange, is that different than being like ASCAP or your songs are registered?
Yep. Yeah, so Sound Exchange is a different nonprofit entity. And it, yep. Yeah, so.
Some of them do sign up for Sound Exchange, some don't.
Yeah. Yep. But it's like 10 minutes. It's super easy.
And ASCAP and BMI are relative to live performance versus streams.
That's right. So ASCAP and BMI will get your live revenues as well as your songwriter. The songwriters who have their songs played on radio will also get a royalty through those rights associations. So. These are great questions.
I mean, as radio stations do report to it, so I would assume you'd be able to get a breakdown, but I've never seen it on that end. Have you seen it or anything? Okay. We'll find out. Yeah, we'll look it up.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I would assume since like Spotify and other streaming services have that for you, like the technology exists. We should be able to do this.
I'm sure it does. Like, I love when I feature you guys in the local 303 when you guys tell me like I have never been Shazammed so much in my life than I was this month when I was on the radio, and everything. That always excites me. We'll fight. We'll totally. We'll figure it out, but maybe not now.
Oh my gosh. I know. I love it. Okay. Loud. Yes.
Alisha, could you talk about the monthly meetups that 1023 does?
Yeah, so we offer at Indy 1023 a monthly meetup. It's usually the final Friday of every month. Because of UMS, the final Friday of this month is on Monday, so we did it just a few days ago. But each month we encourage Colorado music fans, musicians to come to our meetups. It's like a two-hour hangout, and it's really an industry event where we answer your questions about getting your music played on the radio, kind of like we're gonna do now. We listen to some new music, and then we have a band perform. It's one of our local 303 bands. They're super fun, and they're a great way to connect with musicians and everything too. So if you are looking to like continue to meet people in the community, it's a great place to go to.
Awesome.
It's gonna be at Skylark Lounge, I think on August 28th will be the date. And they're 6:30 to 9, so we kind of make it an after-work thing, and it doesn't run too late. And so it's upstairs at Skylark, just across the street.
Nice. So I want to just start with the big picture framing question. And I'm looking at Bruce because I'm going to ask Bruce to go first. So does radio matter?
Yes. Obviously, we're all here. It matters to you. It matters to us. We're inside baseball, I feel like, though. And I've been getting this question since college radio, like, does it matter anymore? We have Spotify, we have Tidal, we have Apple Music. People aren't listening. People are listening. It's actually still like the biggest way to discover music, to hear music, to listen to music, and consume it. More even than the streaming platforms still. It is catching up. It is kind of in a weird time, but it's still good. It's still healthy, and it is still important to get involved in radio. And it's a lot of fun. We're in the community. Like, we're not Spotify where it's like, I'm just gonna discover a few artists. Like, your neighbors are also listening. Like, your neighbors are on the radio actively, and this is how you meet each other, this is how we collaborate, this is how we make a stronger community. And thankfully, Denver has a very strong music community, and you guys are awesome. So yes, it does still matter. It's still very relevant, and don't discount radio. Even within getting plays, but also getting your shows promoted, also within getting, I mean, there's a myriad of ways that radio really helps local musicians and other musicians who are coming through that we want you to know about.
So Chris, I'd like to have you answer the same question, and you don't have to repeat. Bruce got many of the major points out there, but is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I agree with Bruce on pretty much everything. But radio has been my lifeblood, like, through and through for decades now. And I think one of the things that keeps people coming back is the really, like, human aspect of it all. It's the storytelling. It's the DJ, like, getting a note from a mom whose kid had a rough day, and they're telling that story on the air and then playing the song that's, like, helping them get through that moment, you know? And those are things that you're not going to get on any of the DSPs. Those algorithms, like, it's a machine. It's kind of gross on the back end sometimes. Like, labels are paying a certain amount of money to get their stuff more exposure. So you're not going to find the same kind of new music discovery in those places that you will in the radio space. And that's just what is so special to me, that keeps me coming back. And, like, even for, like, the younger generations too, just, like, hearing some of these legacy artists. Like, I talked to a DJ the other day that got to play the Beatles for somebody for the first time. Like, that's so cool. So being able to kind of bring the old in with the new, and just have these programmers and hosts really be able to, like, tell a story through music, to protest through playlists, to, you know, really showcase what's happening in that moment with what's speaking to them, which is very likely going to speak to everyone else that's tuning in as well. It's a really, really magical thing. It builds community, and like Bruce said, it's not going anywhere. So very, very important.
Did they cover it? Do you have anything to chime?
Yeah, I think I think all of that makes sense. And one thing that I hear a lot from our listeners and that I recognize with radio is it is that music discovery. And people always, people that have their Spotify and everything, they listen to like Indie 102.3 or KEXP to discover an artist. And then you can hop onto Spotify and then develop a personal relationship with that band even more. But we're helping to, kick off that love through our passion of an artist and everything. So I always love hearing that where, like Dava Yoder is in the audience, and she was one of our local 303 of the past. So then someone heard her on the radio, and then they go to Spotify, and then they go to listen to her music, and they show up at her shows, and they tell her they're a fan because they heard her on the radio. It does work, and it is impactful. So that's what keeps me coming back too.
And kind of with that too, like going back to like the Spotifys or whatever, working on the promotion side of things, like I'll get those reports from some artists and just seeing those spikes that happen in markets because the airplay has started to increase on a song that's in rotation or something. That's building a fan base in all of these individual markets. And then that can also help you like plan a tour. Be like, oh, we got hella plays in the Twin Cities. Like, let's definitely book a show there. So like, it's a way to kind of like help you map out where your fan base is as well.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to play a bunch of songs. We'll play whatever until we get the nod, 45 seconds, and we're not going to do the whole song, but enough to kind of get the vibe and get a sense of what these things are. And then again, these songs are an entry point to talk about a lot of the complexities about how should artists approach this whole conversation. What are the strategies? How do you choose songs that you feel like you should be pushing and getting behind? So how do you select singles? How do you relate to radio? How do you know how to push and when you need to stop pushing? How you budget in your promotion campaign? And I'm just going to put this on shuffle. And again, these guys come up with a banger playlist that I was very excited about. So let's see. Let's just spin the wheel and see what's coming up first here. And I'm not sure. Let's see. Right. Can you guys hear? Okay. Yeah.
Can everybody hear?
I put my hand by yours, so you know I wanna hold it. I say my prayers at night, but I know who controls it. I fallen hard for you, but I know what I'm strong. I think you look for me, but I know what I'm on. It's not gonna be a big production. It's not butterflies and fireworks. Said it's gonna be a tiny garden, but I feed it every day. I feed it every day.
All right, Chris, I think this is one you suggested. Yeah?
Yes, this is of course Jamila Woods. This is Tiny Garden from her upcoming album that's out this September. She is playing tonight at the Showcase stage at 9 p.m. Thank you. So this new single just got launched at radio like 2 weeks ago, so I don't really have any metrics to judge exactly how it's performing thus far, but I think it's a freaking jam. We didn't quite get into the full song. It's perfect. But like you have this through line with the everyday. The theme of the song I think is like something that will really relate to a lot of folks. It's about just like talking to your partner about how you're going to continue showing up in the relationship, which is something that we all need to be mindful of. And it's just got this really fun kind of like jumpy percussion throughout the whole song, a really great groove. I adore it, and I hope that it is a big radio hit. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I think so. This is my first time hearing the song. I would add it if I were a music director still, because it does have that kind of infectious groove. People are going to remember it. People are going to come back to it. That's kind of the first thing. Is like, is it catchy? Is it? And it doesn't have to be like a beat. It doesn't have to be, X, Y, or Z. But it does have to be something that's kind of memorable, right? Because you're going to kind of tune in to hear more of it. You're going to Shazam it. You're going to remember the name. You're going to come out to her set tonight because you like it. That's kind of the whole entire point, right? Is like, does it have lasting power? And some songs don't have super long lasting power, but I think this one would probably go at least for 8 weeks and still be like a bop. Yeah, more, but like minimum 8 weeks.
What would be considered like good lasting power? Like low lasting power, like 8 weeks?
It's a great question.
6 months.
Yeah.
usually is around the average like cycle for a single. It kind of depends on where you're at, and with something like this, I know the plan for this song is to be at least 12 weeks, and then potentially moving on to another single, but that's kind of dependent on how this one performs. Like, is it going to be time to move to something new? Are people ready for something else to get in the mix? So you kind of have to like judge the landscape of what's happening at radio at that time to be like, do we pivot or do we ride this out?
Yeah, I love this as an artist that we've kind of grown with over the last couple of records, and this is a beautiful new single of hers, and for us, we added it at the station, and we knew she's playing the UMS, so it's easy for us to talk about. Did you guys like the sound of that? Is that something that you would bop along to? I'm always curious, would you turn the radio or not? I think she does have a familiarity in her voice that's really beautiful, and it's iconic, and I think she's an exciting artist.
Absolutely. As someone in the promoter space, especially like summertime, like if I'm sending a ballad out, they're like, this is lovely, but like we need the jams. We want high energy, we want it up. So that definitely does affect it. And tempo overall, I think, is something that radio programmers are always looking for, is something that's like, it's up, it's snappy, like that's what they're really going for.
So Chris, what would the timing be on something like that? So if you feel like you have a summer jam, when are you putting together your marketing plan and starting to go to radio? Is that February, March? Like how do you sequence that in terms of lead time?
That's a complicated question. Because of course there are so many cooks in the kitchen. And so some folks want to have a very like long lead up until album release from announce, where you're gonna have like 6 songs that are dropping. So you're gonna have half the album, if not more, before the whole thing comes out. Some folks want to lead with a strong DSP song that's going to do really well with playlisting at Spotify and Apple and all of that, but might not be the right radio song. So it's a lot of conversations that end up happening between the multiple teams on board with the campaign to figure out what's the right time. If it's an established artist with the album announce, I want to make sure that's the radio single. People are going to start playing it no matter what. So I think that's really the move. If you're more of like an up-and-coming artist, I honestly think like having a song or two out to start getting some recognition, to start getting some more like local community airplay, to get some like press buzz happening before you take like the true single to radio is kind of more the jam.
I have an interesting question, especially after COVID. It's just a trend that I've been noticing. I'd be interested in your perspective. Artists dropping just singles just because it's like, we have this song, it's great, and we're going to drop it. We don't necessarily have an album coming out. They don't get added, or they do immediately get added, depending on who it is. But I think of like Janelle Monáe, and she dropped a few before even announcing the new album, and then Lipstick Lover came out, became the radio hit. What do you think about these singles that are coming out more often now, especially post quarantine? Thank you.
As a fan, I love it. As a radio promoter, I hate it because it would just kind of cannibalize the airplay that we would be trying to get for a song that we're trying to get to chart. And that's just kind of like a gross thing that's part of the radio promotion biz, is like you're trying to get a song to chart because that helps you get to like different levels of what you're trying to establish as a musician. That's going to help you get those TV performances. That's going to help you get those festival bookings if you have these kind of like badges that you can put on your jean jacket, So if it's something like that, it's really troubling, because then someone's like, oh, I can't add this song because we already played 2 singles from this record. I'm like, but the record wasn't announced when you played those. Right. So it can be kind of tricky. Like at a station like KEXP, where I'm going to be going, like, we'll add them no matter what. Like if it's an artist that we like and it's a good song, like that's going to go in and it'll continue to go in, and that doesn't matter. But for some stations that are more like traditional and very single focused, they're going to maybe do 2 singles off of an album for like regular airplay rotation. So you have to be kind of careful and strategic about what you're launching and when.
So we started with a conversation about multiple teams and strategies and aligning resources, and we know that's not the case for most independent artists and most emerging artists. Let's take a listen to this song.
I mean, it's given some of us the stink face, bopping along to it, like, oh yeah. And speaking of singles, this is like a no-name. Is anybody in this band, by the way? They're like a brand new band that formed during pandemic that's based in Fort Collins and members in Denver as well. It's a group called Not a Toy, and this was like their first single. And for some reason, they found that sweet spot. They haven't gotten any radio love until us, but they put that on Spotify. It has like 1.2 million streams on Spotify or something crazy, and it's just like, this is a new band. They haven't done anything else, but they just found that magic. I'd be curious to talk to them more. I think they're playing tonight, actually, at UMS. But this was a nice music discovery where it was like, okay, people will like hearing this on the radio. I think even commercial radio stations would play that band because it sounds like a 21 Pilots, or it sounds like a, you know, something that it would be on KTCL. It just seems like it would be on KTCL locally. But they haven't gotten that love yet, but I could totally see them having it. So this was, I thought, a really good local track.
No, and so obviously you're playing them because this is your mission, right? You are supporting the Colorado music, ecology, and so you're looking for music. So a band who you don't have a personal relationship yet, you like the song, you think it's good, you want to support them, you're playing it. How then do they engage with you and the station moving forward? What is appropriate for them in terms of, do they send you an email and say, thanks for playing our songs, or would you come to our show? Or like what are appropriate things that artists can do, especially when they're at the starting point where they don't have a lot of professional infrastructure and management around them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Please invite us to shows. Let us know what you have going on. Like, even if you're featured 1 month, we still continue to support you on the radio, and I do want to add your new singles when you're releasing them. And yeah, absolutely, please reach out. And interestingly, I've noticed this band is now getting like some management out of Los Angeles. So I think maybe based on their little whatever they were doing on Spotify or getting these spins, and based on that song, they do now have some management, which is exciting for them. Did you like the song, Chris? Like, could you hear it on the radio? Like,
I would have liked to hear some more of it.
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of waiting for it to really like kick in there, but like from what I heard, it has a lot of really great radio potential, and I'd like to learn more about the band, what their plans are. Is there an album coming? Like, having some story and context is really helpful for a radio programmer. That gives them things to talk about on air outside of like, wasn't that great? You know, so like giving them that kind of information that they can have to share with their audiences is so helpful.
that is so important when you guys are making your music and you're wanting to share it with us as radio people, and also to connect with your community. Let people know who you are. Figure out your mission statement in a song and make sure that's the song that you're submitting to us, that the song that you think is going to sound best on the radio. Make sure when you're connecting with people on Instagram and you're trying to grow your Instagram following, which I know is a whole other panel, right? But be authentic and show people who you are and share we want to tell your story on the radio, so share your story and however feels authentic for you. But the more information that you would be submitting to radio, the better, because it is inspiring to tell your musical journey.
And I think also staying on top of that, so like maybe you were local 303 a couple of months ago, or maybe you were featured on a different station a couple of months ago, but you have a new single coming out, make sure that you're still putting that out there. It's not like a one and done sort of situation. A lot of radio stations, community and public alike, really want to support you in a lot of different ways. They want to see you out in the community, they want to see you at shows, and they want to hear when you've got new music coming out. So just even having like a regular newsletter or something, like create a template for yourself that says like, this is what it's going to say when I have a new music single coming out, and I'm going to send it to Alisha, I'm going to send it up to KGNU, I'm going to send it to the Colorado Sound. And like, as much as we want to like be your besties, we also want you to like thrive everywhere in radio. So like, be best pals with all of the radio stations. It's especially with community and public radio, it's not a competition. We're in community together, and we're here for you. So establish those relationships. Go out and see those people, meet them, and become the person that is recognizable and has that sound, and will be able to continue playing.
And just really quick on like the more information, the better, kind of. I like put it in a one sheet and then also like maybe link to an EPK where the person can find more information if they want. Like if there's 20 attachments to the email, I'm probably not going to read it. Yes.
So that's an electronic press kit. So sort of basic marketing materials that you'd attach to an email. Yeah.
Yeah, like a Spark page, like whatever you want to do. Even if you just have a very generic like Dropbox link to like, these are my press photos, these are my tour ad mats, this is my bio. Like even that like is perfectly fine. But like in the body of the email or whatever you're submitting, like keep it concise with some of kind of like the quick hitters so that like they can really easily glean like what's exciting, what they want to talk about, and then they can choose to dig deeper if they're ready.
I would love, Bruce, to ask you to speak to the relationship between artists' ability and willingness to engage with local radio and how that translates into selling tickets and getting audience members out at shows.
Sure. I think it's been really interesting post-pandemic and also, not pandemic, I hate that term, sorry, post-quarantine. Kind of figuring out what that relationship is, because live music, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, is also kind of all over the place. It's kind of a mess. But you hear people on air, and that's kind of the point of it. And if you have a show coming up, that's also when you want to reach out and be like, hey, I got this big thing. We've got an album coming out. Here is my EPK. Make an EPK, please. Here's my EPK. Here's what we're talking about, and here's when the show is. That gives us, like, more than enough to talk about in our break. Like we've got Kid Astronaut has a new single out. He's going to be playing here, and we're super excited. Here's the song, and it's just like an easy transition. We don't have to search for it. We don't have to be like, well, we've got this new single from Kid Astronaut. Okay, you know, like give us that information, and then we do see those ticket sales. And if you can have somebody jump on and present a show, Indie 102.3 does a ton of presents out in the community, and we like to be out at those shows as much as possible and kind of meet the fans that are also interested in it. But that way you've got like a known entity as well that's kind of a part of that show that's supporting you, that's putting their name out there as well. It's a really mutually beneficial friendship, basically, whenever you have that presence and have that extra support. So yeah, the radio play, the radio relationship really helps to sell those tickets. And then of course that's going to get more merch out there, especially if I go to your goddamn show. So yes, do that.
And that could be an interview, that could be a podcast appearance, that
Exactly.
could be yeah. And I don't see this in Colorado very much. I mean, frankly, I think Colorado's got much more collaborative, you know, kind of community alignment and infrastructure than most markets that I'm familiar with. But, you know, in some quarters, there's a whole, like, I'm too good for this promotion game. I want my music to speak for itself. I'm going to, you know, make good records and play good shows, but I don't want to do the hustle. Like, I don't want to go do the radio stuff. I don't want to do that. And it's just, you know, the reality is there's so much music and such little, you know, room for stuff. That just means you are just taking yourself out of the game. So if you have a manager, if you can afford, you know, people like Cosign or others to do that work for you, maybe you have a shot. But if you're too precious for it, then just take it off the table. It can't happen. All right, let's listen to this one. Ready? Yeah. It's just like, yeah, more music.
So is this a song? This is that you would play on the radio? Do you hear this as a
Heavy
single?
rotation, absolutely.
HR.
This is Blonde Shell with the new single Salad off of her debut self-titled album. that just came out on Partisan Records this year. I am a massive fan. Alisha and I were just whispering about seeing her open for Porridge Radio at Lost Lake.
Lost Lake last summer.
That was like September, October. Yeah, it was
Yeah. Oh,
wild.
yeah.
I don't even remember, but it feels like eons
Before
ago.
the album came out.
Way before. And she's really just been making incredible waves. And this was a radio campaign that I got to work on, and we started it very like non-traditionally with a single Kiss City that we released before even the label signing was announced, because she was starting to get a lot of this really natural, organic buzz in the LA scene, but also beyond. So we wanted to start getting that buzz happening at radio too. And we ended up getting a lot of really wonderful ads on this single, and then launched with our like next one, Joiner, with the album announced in January. And now this new single, Salad, is like still going. So this is one of those kind of like perfect storm radio campaigns where you have 3 singles that are actually hitting and helping to propel this artist to new levels. Like, she's finishing her headline tour now. She's going back to the UK, and then she's opening for Liz Phair this fall, which is just insane. So being a part of like watching that journey has been so, so special.
And I whispered to Michael while this was on, I was like, I could totally, like, if it was the 90s, I totally could have heard that song on the radio if I listening to KTCL in the 90s or something like that. So radio stations across the country are picking that one up. This isn't a local artist. She's LA, right?
She's LA, yeah. But there has been some pushback on this song. If you're paying attention to the lyrics of it, it's basically this dream sequence of her murdering her friend's rapist. And so it's very heavy. There is like gun references in the song, which can be very triggering for folks. So we do have a radio edit that takes that word out. Want to be very mindful of like, anyone that's maybe been affected with gun violence or anything like that in their lives, but it's a heavy song. So some people like aren't exactly sure how to talk about it. She doesn't even talk about it. When she's on stage, she's like, the song's about salad, because it speaks for itself, and it's a very emotional song about this horrible thing that happened to a friend of hers. So with some of that pushback, it's been interesting, but more people want to tell the story and have the song kind of do it on its own.
And I wonder, Lucy Dacus has the one about wanting to kill her friend's father, and that was just like a live show thing, became a single, and it's like a fan favorite. We see these songs with like heavy themes coming in, and I think that that's kind of an uncomfortable thing, especially for more traditional radio folks to deal with and decide if they're going to add it or not. How do you see that trend happening with those types of songs?
I see them trending upwards, and quite honestly, I think a lot of the spaces where we have trouble getting songs like those pushed through are by stations that are run by like 60-plus-year-old white dudes. Like, they don't know how to talk about it. They haven't been affected by things like this in their lives, so just like, because it's uncomfortable, they're just like, we're just not gonna do it, And so I think there are more people that are entering the radio space in a programming aspect that are just like, no, let's have these conversations, because it can be a really great way to connect with your community members that have maybe suffered domestic abuse or violence or anything like that in their lives. And like, they feel seen, they feel heard, they want those stories told. They're not alone, and like being able to feel that in a song and like have a radio station in your community like recognize that's special.
All right, let's.
There is a very dark energy coming out of that song.
Yeah.
I think it's all about balance, really. Like, if you have everything that's just like super up-tempo pop, that's just like hit training that never stops. You need a little bit of that breather. You need to have something that's going to break it up in the mix so that you do have the variety going on. You don't just want to keep hearing like the same iteration of a sound for hours and hours. That's when the listener is going to turn to the next style, And if you do listen to the song too, like the crescendo that happens with like more instrumentation going on with like the horns that come into the mix later, like you've got this really, really, really cool build that like does get to a bit more of an up-tempo moment, but it is dark, it is heavy, and that's part of what makes it so great. Oh, we have lights. Okay.
Speaking of dark.
Hi. We don't like dark energy here, I guess.
To be clear, I would absolutely add that, and I think back to what Chris was saying, like, it's a part of our community conversation that needs to happen. Like, having these conversations is kind of the responsibility of a community and public radio station, because that is the experience of many of us here in this room and people that and it's cathartic, and so we can have like the fun poppy Janelle Monáe next to this. There's nothing wrong with that, and like like Chris was saying, we need that balance, and we need to have that, because certain stations do try and just keep it like, we're all happy all the time, and it's that toxic positivity that's total bullshit, and like that's not what we're living. So we do need to have that balance. We do need to have the dark, heavy content, because it's real, and we feel that, and we do have that catharsis when we hear sad songs or angry songs or whatever, and that's why they're out here. That's why punk rock is so great too, and that's why rap is so good. It's, you know, the genres speak for themselves, and that's why we're all a part of these smaller communities, and radio is able to bridge all of those gaps.
Yeah, radio wants to help share your stories because you've all been through stuff. That's why you're writing songs and everything. And the right radio stations will understand that, and the right radio stations will celebrate your music and your themes, as effed up as they might be.
Could you speak to the sort of strategy around, like, you can service a station, right? So you can say we're sending it to 102.3, or I know that there's a particular DJ that likes certain artists that I feel like I'm touring with, or I'm the same line with, or so what is the sort of balance between hyper-targeting specific shows or DJs versus just kind of going all out for the station, or is it both?
I think it's a little bit of both. For Indie 102.3, on our website, we have like a local 303 page, and it's just the submission process there. So, which that just all gets sent to me, and I spend a portion of my work week listening to your radio submissions and everything, and sort of like planning out the next handful of months as to who we're going to feature in different months. But you know, if there's a radio DJ that you really like, you can send them an email like, hey Dana, I like listening to you on the radio. I saw on Instagram that you went to this concert. My music sounds like that. Maybe check out my song. Not everybody can respond to your emails and everything, but I think that's also a casual thing to do. But figure out, do your research, especially when you are sending to radio, and the good radio stations have the right ways on how to submit your music. Like KEXP will be like, all right, here's our criteria for sending in songs. Our radio station, here's what we need from you. Like We've worked in radio long enough that we want to celebrate your music, and so we're asking you certain questions online to like make it so you can best get your information to us. So again, all the right radio stations will have those tools for you guys as independent artists to be able to get your music to us.
Yeah, and do your homework too as far as like the individual hosts go. If you're a folk artist and you're submitting your song to the hip hop show, like that's not going anywhere. That's a waste of everybody's time. So just make sure you're listening to the individual shows and the stations as well. Like there's so many different formats out there. So like be mindful of where you're spending your time, because it might be worth it and it might not. So just listen to the station and you'll know.
Gotta follow up. So I used to host a Especial, which was like Indie 102.3's Latin show. And that's kind of like, it sucks that still has to exist in the radio format, but that's also a place where maybe if Indie 102.3 wasn't gonna add, or it wasn't a great fit for the local 303 just yet, I was able to add that, and I was able to make it fit in with other songs that it was close to. So find those specialty shows. There's a lot, especially here in Colorado. Like we are a wealth of community and public radio stations here, so you got a lot of support. But find those shows where it's like, oh, I maybe do identify as queer. I'm gonna send this to Demi for Serve It, and I'm gonna send it to all of these other like queer shows that are around Colorado, and build up my community. Or maybe at whatever subcategory, whatever thing that you identify with, there's likely a radio station or a show somewhere that is perfect fit for you that you maybe didn't think of before, that you didn't realize existed. And then that's also gonna maybe like branch you out into something different. Like I was able to like play the Mañanas almost immediately after they released their first single in 2020, and I fell in love with those babes. And then they did become Local 303, and now it's like everybody loves the Mañanas, and it's so great because it was like, okay, I was able to feature them in a Especial, and then it was able to grow. And you see that with a lot of different specialty shows.
And could you all speak to also the fact that you know, so many programmers and DJs are so deeply networked, right? And so they want to know what are you into? They want to know what Kevin's into, or you know, at KEXP or whatever. And the importance, especially as bands start to tour. So if they know that they've been supported by Indie 102.3, would Boise Radio Boise want to know that, like how that works?
Yeah, like with Indie 1023, with KEXP, we're part of like the NPR music world. So we have, you know, these sister stations across the country that we're connected with. And a lot of times if you do a session at Indie 1023 or if you do a session at KEXP, you're golden to get recognized by other public radio stations across the country and everything. We've heard from, like, there's a local band called Dragon Deer. They've been around maybe for eight or 9 years now. But Dragon Deer's very first session was at our radio station. They were able to take the recordings that we did and the content that we generated, and then they submitted for a festival in New Orleans, like a few months later, and they booked like a pretty decent slot at a New Orleans music festival that they were a great fit at, and so they started to grow their audience a little bit more. So I think if you can, you know, get in with a public radio station that you're passionate about, yeah, there is that network. And also, like, at the end of the year and stuff like that, like NPR Music will reach out to us and be like, all right, who locally have you guys championed this year? Who should be on our radar? Or, you know, encourage all your favorite local bands to submit for the Tiny Desk contest. So we do have interactions with like NPR Music, if that's something that's interesting to you. We do have a little dialogue with them too, and we contribute to their stories and stuff.
And please.
You know, Bruce, like with this special, like obviously that was a really unique kind of Latin show because it expanded all genres. But like, I'm curious, like what y'all's tips are for artists who, like, with your identities, it doesn't align with the perceived genre of like what you should be performing.
Great question.
Right, like as a queer Chicana, like oftentimes if I just say that, there's a perception of what my sound is like, but it's obviously punk rock. So like,
Yeah, right.
like any tips on that strategy?
Yeah, tips?
I don't have any tips because I think it's garbage. I think that's something that specifically Latin and Chicano artists have to deal with, that Black artists have to deal with, that, I mean, anybody who's not white bread has to kind of deal with, because it's like, okay, well, we're going to label you as a Latin artist. You're a punk rock artist. That's it. If we listen to you, I wouldn't be able to say like, oh, she's probably brown and queer. I mean, maybe, but like, you know, like just listening to the music part of it, or
Yeah.
like this label that we have to put on Black artists that it's urban alternative, it's urban, it's fucking rock music. It's like, it's so annoying, and it is a part of this like white supremacist thing that we're all still dealing with, and I'm sorry, but that's like what we're also trying to break down
And for me, you're
figure
just
out.
a local artist, and you know that that's my connection with you, but it's like, that's hard to translate perhaps to other radio stations. Like, we get you, we understand you, we champion you. What would you say, Chris? Like, from
I
your
mean,
perspective as a
Yeah,
promoter
it's a
over the
constant
years?
battle. Like, gender is not a genre, ethnicity is not a genre, sexuality is not a genre, but so many folks want to make it that. And so just being straightforward about what your music is at the top as you're submitting it, yes, include your identity too. That's so important to who you are and the music that you create, and that might get you a foot in the door on some of those specialty shows like Especial, like Serve It, and that's a jumping off point, and that's where you need to continue to have the conversations. That's something that I've had to do with a number of folks that will like ghettoize a Jamila Woods to the HD2 Urban Alt channel, and like, okay, fine, that's a good place to start, but like, she should be on Morning Drive, she should be on Midday, she should also
Absolutely.
be on Overnights, you know, she should be everywhere. So just take those entry points where you can. It sucks that they have to exist, but they do still have to exist. Otherwise, like, a lot of that music isn't going to get played on a lot of these stations. And so it's at least a starting point, which, you know, it is what it is, but use that as a conversation starter. Use that as a means to get to the program director and the music director and be like, hey, XYZ at your station have been supporting me. Why am I not in rotation?
And we're a panel of, as most of you know, like passionate promoters for our community, for all communities. But this is probably a good time to,
Yeah, let's go. Let's do.
with this conversation in mind. So this is a Colorado artist. A lot of you I know already know who it is, who actually, he attended this very radio panel last year because he was kind of an up-and-coming artist at the time. Who knows who this is? Neptune, our beloved Neptune, which speaking of like boxes, where does he fit in? Like, for me, I'm like, all radio stations should be playing Neptune. I should hear him on KS 107.5, but he's a queer black man. It might not be being played everywhere, speaking of like, what box do I fit in? But man, I want that song, everybody to hear it. I want everybody to bang it. I want everybody to see him live, which highly recommend his
live.
performance. But this is one of those artists that I think deserves radio play. He has, besides his story, it's just great music.
So he performed last night here for UMS Preview, and he also just covered Kill Bill, like SZA's Kill Bill. And it came out today, and it's amazing and perfect. But that's the thing, is also seeing him live, like you see his musicianship, and it's like, it is intoxicating, and he gets so into it and so passionate. And I agree, he should be played on several radio stations, but he is a very loud gay black man, and not everybody's comfortable with that yet. And it's such a shame because the music, like, you get chills from it. You just like, it's so good. So I don't know. That's the weird one too. It's like sometimes it hinders you, sometimes it helps you. Where are we? Late stage capitalism.
And just sonically too, like, it is genreless. Like, he's fusing together so many different sounds that, like, you're like, what box do you fit in? He doesn't fit in a box. He fits in all of the boxes. And I think that's what becomes so troubling to a lot of programmers, because they can't necessarily qualify it. And so because he is so innovative and so avant-garde, like, that's difficult for some people, though, like, I think that should be fucking celebrated.
I love calling him Denver's Beyonce, which I've been coining that since the moment I introduced him to an audience of like the sound person and myself for Westward Music Showcase like 2 or 3 years ago. But I hope the best for him. I was really excited. He got an opportunity at Gothic Theater to open up for a national band called Sleigh Bells. Sleigh Bells were so intoxicated by his performance opening up for them that they actually invited him on their national tour. So sometimes things can happen like that. If you happen to open up for a national artist, you might get the opportunity to then play for them. I know there's a local artist, Koos, and she got the opportunity to open up for Camp locally, and then she's actually gone out on some dates with them, which is very exciting for her. So sometimes that can happen too, just as a side note from radio play.
All right, you want to go?
Yeah.
Yeah? Or stay in Colorado? Corin.
We know who that is, right? Cultural babies. Yeah, so fun fact, actually, they played UMS their first time 2018. We did porch sessions right down the street for the radio station. We had no idea who Kiltro was. Alisha chose them just because it was like, I don't know who they are.
They had a song on SoundCloud, so they didn't have a Spotify account. They hadn't really even played locally, but they had this one song called Ophelia, and like I heard it, and I was like, oh, shit.
And it was just,
something to this band.
It was just Will and Chris, and they showed up, and they're just the sweetest babes on the planet. And I was producing in the back of the house, so I wasn't even watching them, and just like hearing them start to play, I looked at Jesse Witten, who was also producing with me. We like were speechless. We were like, "Holy shit, who is this?" And now they're here. This is their second off of their second album.
They've been on a national tour
They're
recently.
just
a
got
couple
back.
national tours.
Cosign is working with them to do more radio promotion, so it's like getting up and bigger. But it was like UMS was like the first place that we met them and heard them, and it's like I always every time I hear them, and especially like this weekend, I'm like, oh, like the UMS porch sessions, it was so great. But either I guess like all of us could probably tell a love story about Kiltro, and especially like how radio has been involved and how it's helping them now with these national tours.
Yeah, I want to hear from Chris, because like locally for me, it's like a no-brainer. They make beautiful music. We've had this long relationship with them, having not really, but discovered them or whatever. Same with Naoma and just so many artists per se. But I want to know from you, from like a radio promoter sort of standpoint, that like you can give an idea to local artists that are here, like how did that campaign for Kiltro come about? And they have local management through a place called 7S.
Yeah, so that they reached out to us about getting involved with this record, which I was so excited about because years ago, Bruce drugged me out to, well, not drug me, but we were going to see Flor de Toloache at Swallow Hill, and she was like, you need to see this opener. You are going to love them, and she was correct. And then I got this new album, and it's such a huge step forward for the band, and it's been really wonderful to see the radio pick up nationally. Like, they've done sessions with Radio Milwaukee. They just taped a World Cafe session that's going to be airing soon, which is super exciting. They got like the Today's Top Tune treatment at KCRW, which is the big non-commercial station in Los Angeles. They've been getting some airplay on KEXP, trying to get a session happening there. I know a guy now. But yeah, so it's been really cool to see the response to it. And we were able to jumpstart it with the first single, All the Time in the World, at the music meeting that's kind of like this, at the non-convention in Philadelphia in May. And just the reaction in that room was incredible. People were really excited to hear more. They had not heard anything about this band before. And then we were able to service that song the next Monday, and people were instantly adding it to rotation. Some folks did be like, oh, we're going to put this into our like Latin alt category where it's going to get the HD2 spins or whatever. And one of those things, like, I will take that as an entry point, but I'm not taking that as a stopping point. Like, we're going to continue to have these conversations and see how we can move up into a regular rotation. And now we're switching to the new single, Wanako, which is such a fucking jam. It's so good. And like, we were all at the album release show, and just they closed with this song, and just seeing the energy in that room was amazing. And I was talking to part of the management team like a month ago who finally got to see the band live, and she was just like, holy shit, like, seeing is believing. I was like, I know, dude, like, come on. So just trying to get as many people out to these shows as possible, and just, yeah, getting them to witness the magic.
Yeah, do you have, Chris, again, from you on a radio promotion side of thing, what would you tell, like, these folks that are here? Because like for me, I will listen to their music as a local music director. Like, it is my job to elevate them. Like, for you in your role when you were at Cosign, like, how do you communicate whether or not a young artist is the right fit for bringing on a promotions team? Like, should they spend the money on it?
Yeah, I mean, you need to make sure that whoever you're going to be working with believes in you and your art. Like, you need to make sure that they get it, that they're actually invested, and they're not just like trying to send you an invoice to get paid to do another thing. Like, that's not doing anyone any good. So just like have a lot of those conversations. Take those meetings. If that's like a spend that you're ready to do, figure out what budget you have in mind before you have those conversations, because they're going to throw out some numbers to you about what they want to set up. So then you can go back to them with the budget you have in mind and see if they can tailor it. Like, that's something that I've done with a lot of like younger up and coming bands that I like really believe in. I'm like, okay, this is what we normally do and would charge. What's your budget? Okay, you can't do that. Let's figure out like how we can maybe adjust this a little bit. Like, we'll do every other week reporting or something, just like figure out a way to still get the music out there, to still do well by the project while saving you a little bit on your bottom line too. But like, yeah, it is an investment to bring on a team, but it's a worthwhile one if you really believe that it's something that can get airplay, because like people like me, we have the relationships. I've been talking to these programmers for 15 plus years. So like they know me, they trust me, and they know that like I'm not gonna take on a project that I don't care about. Like it is going to be quality, it is gonna be something that's worth their time to listen to. So they're gonna sit down and they're gonna press play for 3.5 minutes on this song.
So just to amplify that, I mean, if you are putting money, if you're a newer artist and you're putting personal money, often family money, into building a team, and you're going to be paying someone to be your representative, you've got to do your due diligence to understand who else this person works with, what their successes are, how they're going to represent you.
Yeah, take multiple meetings. Like, talk to a couple different people. Talk to your friends about maybe who they've worked with, companies that they've had good success with, and start there. But like, don't just go with the first company. Make sure you have several conversations, because you might find somebody on a team that's maybe like new to that team that like gets you, and they're gonna do right by you.
And we're here. Alisha and I have worked with a lot of companies. I trust Cosign because I've been working with them across 4 stations now, and it's always done me right. And by the way, they also serviced Nathaniel Rateliff with his debut album. And by the way, Alisha played Nathaniel Rateliff before the Night Sweats, and it's like that's like the power of this panel up here is like that they're making this shit happen. They're breaking artists. They're getting it to that next level through the radio. And yeah, I would, you can talk to me about the different radio services and distributors that I trust, because there are some that I don't. And I'm like, none of your music has ever worked out for me, and I'm sorry, but like Cosign is one of those that always has, and there are a couple of other handful of folks that I do trust with decision making and programming. So there are resources everywhere.
My question is just not necessarily specific ones, but I feel like a lot of times when you're looking for somebody to help you in general, a lot of what you just find online is scammy, and just people looking for money. So do you have any recommendations for how to like vet things like that, or make sure that it is something like Cosign, where even if it weren't the right fit, they're at least not like somebody just trying to get you to pay them what you know?
Is there a good access point along the same lines, a good hub or an access point for where respectable, reliable managers, team people could be accessed?
I feel like there used to be one on CMJ. There used to be a good directory, RIP. But that feels like that should be something that should exist again. There is like kind of the general chart for college and community stations is NACC. I don't know if they have like a database. They don't really do much extra. Yeah. Without having an actual directory in mind, like set up a Zoom, not a call, but like an actual Zoom meeting so you can see this person and look them in the eyes, and like you can tell if someone's like totally bullshitting you or not, right? Like I think we all have a pretty good radar for that at this point in our lives. So that would be like one good recommendation, or like message me on IG and I can tell you if they're bullshit or not.
And also, I encourage you, like, if there's a band that you really like, that that maybe you want to message them on Instagram to be like, hey, have you done a radio promotions campaign, or have you ever booked a national tour? Could you just give me the name? Like, I know we don't know each other, but I love what you do. Could you recommend someone to me? Like, that's also a lot of times you'll find that like another band that maybe is just a little bit more successful than you will be responsive as well. But yeah, great question. Should we do one last?
I've got a surprise for the panel. So we'll do one more song, we'll do any last questions, and then we'll be around this week, most of us, so everybody just, Bruce. Bruce's panel tomorrow on live venues, on music venues, is going to be amazing. You got venue owners from Fort Collins and Colorado Springs and here in Denver, and it's going to be freaking awesome. So I definitely recommend this. So this is fun. What I'm going to do, I think it's fun. We'll let you judge if it's fun. We're going to premiere a song. This is a song that actually is going to have its official world premiere tonight at 5 o'clock on the station where Chris will be working. And we'll see. We will see if the panel recognizes the artist, because it's a little bit of a different sound.
mean, it's Kevin Cole premiering it, right? So I'm just like, who is this?
So that is the new single, Chopper, from Dessa.
Of course, Kevin Cole. Okay, Minneapolis. This totally makes sense. I love Dessa. That's totally different for her.
So I wanted to, I don't know who in this room is familiar with Dessa, Minneapolis-based, multi-talented everything writer, performer, rapper. But I wanted to bring Dessa into this conversation because she's also just like the best person. And I would like to ask you guys, like, seriously, as artists go through their career, people in your shoes will be oftentimes rooting for the artist to do well. And I would like you just to speak to how people can think about carrying themselves as they're going through this incredibly hard and impossible industry, and how that can translate into people, again, wanting to work with you and support you because they like you. And they may not, I mean, the music is the music, and if the music doesn't work, it's not going to get played. But could you speak to either Dessa or just as an idea about just being mindful of that?
I think Dessa is like a perfect example of that. So my relationship with Dessa, just as far as Indie 1023 goes, 12 years ago when we were launching the station, she first and foremost was part of a hip-hop collective out of Minneapolis called Doomtree. So when we launched Doomtree as an underground hip-hop group, they stopped by our studio to perform Bangarang. They stopped by our studio to perform. That was our first interview with them. And then so every time they would come through Colorado, because like they have the love and the support of like the Indie 1023 equivalent in Minneapolis, which is called The Current. So they know the power of The Current, where they're from, and all the love that they've gotten there. So they've kind of continued that relationship with us. So we continued to play Doomtree. And then when Dessa was going off as a solo artist to do her own thing, we continued to like have her in for a session, have her in for a guest DJ. And also highly recommend, just as a musician, she's a writer as well. And she wrote this beautiful biography. I highly recommend listening to the Audible of it because I loved hearing her read it to me when it came out. But yeah, she's one of those artists that is an evolution for her. And she's an artist that like can make a pop song about grief, but make it sound so pretty and everything. What would you add about Dessa?
I mean, you covered a lot there. That book is amazing, so definitely do really recommend digging into that. But like, this song is a really interesting new direction for her, and I think that's something that is going to garner a lot more radio play. 'Cause like, it's dance, it's up, it's pop, and like, unfortunately, like women in the hip hop space still struggle to get the same pickup as their men counterparts, you know. So I think maybe going in this direction is going to get more airplay, get more ears on her, and I so desperately hope that people will then go to the back catalog and like learn how sonically diverse it really, really is.
Yeah, that's so true. She's like, because she has been doing this for over 20 years, like music is her life, so total respect for this. Also, when she came in and did a guest DJ with us, she was like, there's this new artist, Billie Eilish, there's this song, Ocean Eyes, and everything. So she was the one that turned me on to Billie Eilish, like it had just come out. She was like, there's this girl? Anyways.
Well, and to go more into depth on like the sound shift, I mean, we saw that with Tegan and Sarah in 2013 or 14, something like that. But that did garner more radio play, and that did garner more touring, and that garnered more sales. And so there was that. But to your point, Dessa just being a really wonderful human being on top of that, like, I will go to the ends of the earth for certain people because they're just like decent human beings. If you're an asshole, I'm gonna remember that. I'm not gonna not play you, but maybe you're not gonna be invited back into the studio if you're gonna be an asshole to my sound engineer, like, who I will also go to the ends of the earth for. So there is something to be said for kindness, of course, just in general, but also being good to the people that are trying to help you. Like, if you're gonna go to a venue, if you're gonna go to a radio station and act like a dick, you're gonna feel the ramifications of that later. So please be kind. We're also just human beings. We're also trying to figure all of this out. The music industry is hot garbage, and we're just trying to make it easier for all of us. So Dessa, whatever she needs, she could call me right now and ask her to pick her up at the airport, and I would be like, bye guys, I gotta go pick up Dessa.
I'll do a little shout out because Kaylin's back there. Hi, Kaylin. We love you. Kaylin is Wheelchair Sports Camp, and that's one of those obvious artists that have been part of my musical story for forever with our radio station and beyond. And it's like anything that Kaylin does, whether it's, you know, her hip hop or like her score for the Alice in Wonderland production that she was in as well. Like, yeah, sure love you, Kaylin. And yeah, you're one of those artists that will do anything for you.
We're actually at time. I'm sorry, you guys, but
We can talk music all day.
these guys.
Thank
rock
you.
stars.